there's always been something about Reconstruction that has caught my attention when I've read something about it. But because it's given such short shrift in school, I never really learned that much about it. I might see something here like Black people got the right to vote. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Or I would see like a little nugget here or a little nugget there. But I never really like learned that much about it. The reason that I decided to write about this period, it also goes back to the Mother Emanuel massacre. And I was doing a Wikipedia search on the church after the massacre, and I had never heard of the church before. And it is also a fascinating institution as a part of American history. And so what I learned when I started looking into the church was that it was founded in the late 18 teens, so like 1817, 1818, by a man named Denmark Vesey, who led one of the largest attempted slave revolts in American history. And he was found out. His slave revolt was thwarted. He was executed along with all of his co-conspirators, which was a common response to slave revolts. And another thing that was common was that the laws were passed that prohibited African Americans, free or enslaved, from practicing their religion at that time, because they realized that the Black people were using the church as a vehicle to organize against their oppression, and you couldn't have that. And so, a similar thing happened after Nat Turner's uprising in Virginia and other places. A very common response is to say, "Okay, Black people, you're done with church." And so, but the congregants, the members, continued to meet in secret up until the end of the Civil War, when they were liberated and had freedoms and could participate in so many promises of American equality, like freedom of religion. And so one of the first things that they did was they built their first brick and mortar church. And it wasn't the same building that they have today, because that church burned down, but they built their first church. And the pastor who led that church, and remember, the Reconstruction era is the period immediately following the Civil War, before the Jim Crow era of segregation took root. And the pastor who led the church during Reconstruction was a man named Richard Daddy Kane. Daddy in quotes, right? Not his birth name, but we'll call him Daddy. And so it was Richard Kane. And then, I click on the Richard Kane hyperlink, and I see he was one of the first Black members of Congress. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And this is literally all because of the tragic massacre that I even started making these connections and seeing history. I felt really like come alive and have this connective tissue in a way where I think it's really easy in 2022 to say, 1870, how is this relevant? That is 150 years ago. It's so long ago. But then when you really start seeing how it is woven together, and that there's so many connections and so many parallels. And so it was when I saw that he served in Congress, United States Congress, in the 1870s, and that he was one of 16 African Americans that served in Congress at that time in Reconstruction, not all at once. It was maybe like 5 in one congressional session, 5 in another, but over the period of 1870 to 1877, which is kind of like the prime Reconstruction years. There were 16 Black members of Congress, including 2 United States senators, right? And that blew my mind, because President Obama was the president at the time, and he was only like, I mean, I don't want to get the number wrong, but maybe like the 5th African American senator at that time. So he was only the 5th when he was elected in the early 2000s. And yet there were 2 in the 1870s. So it's like, this doesn't make a lot of sense until you start digging, deeper, and understand how the promise of that period of the Reconstruction era was very much derailed, and and the course that we could have been on as a nation, where so much of the racial stratification and inequalities that I think are obvious to most people, probably would not have existed if we had dealt with this issue back then in the 1870s.
This author interview was produced through a partnership of the Grateful American Foundation and WETA. For more author interviews, please visit adlit.org.